Yeah.
All right, sorry. I'm Billy. Fran, she asked me to say something, so, I'm not good at this, evidently. But anyways, talking about Scott, every time I would walk up the stairs, I'd walk in, and the first thing he would say, "Shut that door, the kitty. So I was always in a rush, so I always made sure the kitties never got out. He'd always be sitting in his chair off to the side. Usually when I go there, it would be in the afternoon. He'd have to talk about his stocks. Good day, bad day, and then the computer right behind him, there would always be a new picture every day popping up that he would always talk about. And it was enjoying, he liked his wine. I don't like wine, but he would always sit down. He'd always have a couple glasses of wine. And we'd always talk about sports too, so. All right, bye, Scott.
Do this. Scott was a good father, good man. Sadly missed. He decided he was gonna buy a new car, so we helped him get a Chevy Traverse. And, one day I showed up and talked to him and said, "You wanna go for a ride?" I said, "I'll go with you." So we drove all the way down, left my wife at home with Fran, and I think they thought we got lost, cause we were gone for an hour. We drove down the river, and all the way down the Amber Road, looked at the river, and we came back on the other side of the road, and I said, "What's all them white things out there on the river?" He said, "Well, remember the pelicans?" I said, "Well, they're pretty." So I'd never seen them where I live. Scott said, "Let's go look at them." And he's driving his Traverse, and he just jumped the curb and drove right up over the grass and down through this road. There was no road there. I said, "Scott, where are we going?" "We're gonna look at the pelicans." I said, "Well, this is an all-wheel drive car, but it's not a four-wheel drive." But we went down through it, and we got to the edge of the riverbank there, and he stopped and looked at them, and he said, "Well, there's more of them down this other road." So we turned around, came back out, and we drove down this road into this section of boat houses, I call them, temporary houses, and sure enough, there's a big sign up, the road closed. I said, "Scott, we can't go back there, the road's closed." He says, "We got a four-wheel drive." He went around the sign, drove through the grass, and got back on the road, and we went all the way back into this dead end to look at these pelicans. And we sat out there, and I said, "Well, you brought your camera on, let's take a picture." So he got his camera out, and he always liked taking pictures of everything, so we took a couple pictures of these pelicans, and we got back in the car, and I said, "Well, we better get out of here, we're gonna get in trouble." So that sign said the road closed, and he said, "Well, they gotta catch me first." I don't think he drove over 20 miles an hour. I always enjoyed Scott's company, our trips up north, and really gonna miss him. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ron Ferris, and Fran asked me to speak just a few minutes ago. Unfortunately, I told her I came prepared. I'm good at writing things down and reading them. I'm not so good at remembering things by recollection, but so most of you know Scott as a friend, as a fellow fisherman, as a husband, as a father, as a grandfather, and more. And he was just a lot more than that. I knew Scott as a colleague at Pride Company, at NK Company, Sandoz Company, and the Novartis Company. These are all businesses in the seed business. And, excuse me, but I'm suffering from a cataract and I can't read through one of my lenses. He also became my friend as well, in addition to being a colleague. I first met Scotty in Glen Haven after joining the company in the fall of 1979. My first impressions of this guy was he's a little bit rough around the edges. And we spent several days walking corn nurseries and trials and inspecting parent seed fields. These are probably terms you don't hear too much in the Glen Haven area. And I soon learned that those rough edges were only on the outside, and this guy was a genius inside. My impressions quickly changed and continued to grow stronger the longer we worked together, and that was for quite a few years. You may not be aware, but Scott had a PhD in plant breeding and genetics from Purdue University, one of the most prestigious universities at the time in plant breeding. He was a true professional, effectively managing the integration of the science with the art, what they call the art of plant breeding, in a way to be one of the most productive breeders I'd ever known. Scott was a humble guy, and I expect most of you did not know that of his success as a corn breeder. He developed more inbred lines, successful inbred lines, and hybrids independently and as part of a team with all of our other breeders, at least while I was there working with him. This was further recognized and when he was awarded with the title of Novartis Senior Scientist, a first from the agriculture business of Novartis, which is primarily a nutrition and pharmaceutical business, for his contribution to the seed business and his contribution to agriculture in the Northern Corn Belt. So that's a bit about Scott that you probably didn't know, and it's how I learned to appreciate him as not only as a scientist and as a colleague, but a friend and a great human being. Last, I want to tell you a little just short personal story. Last week I was talking with my grown son, 37 years old, about Scotty, and he had remembered that I had often talked about him, and Scotty would tell stories and I'd always pass stories on to him, my son. And to this day, my son, whose name is Scott Gilbertson Ferris, believes that had something to do with how he got his name. I'm not sure that's the reason, but he still believes that might be a little piece of how he got that name. And so he lives on in my life, Fran and Lisa and Zach, in a different way, but every time I see my son's name, it's hard to forget Scotty.
Yeah, thank you.
Rough around the edges is mild. You could tell his mood by how grumpy he was. Whether he was talking with you, or a doctor, or his own kids. I appreciated Scotty's candor in life. He called a spade a spade. He'd said something, he meant it. those qualities he tried to instill in people he worked with and played with, whether it was in Hawaii or at home or fishing. I can remember only fishing one time with Scotty, but it was a very memorable one. So, he will be missed, but he will be remembered. I appreciate the opportunity that he's helped me in my life. So, we'll continue the remembrance.
And my mom is cousin to Fran, so that's how we're connected. But it was back in probably 1982, and we were visiting with Scott and Fran, and I was talking with them, and I had been a music major for 2 years, and I was like, I tested, and science was it. So I talked with Scott, and he told me all about agronomy, and I thought, man, he gets to go to Hawaii once a year. That is pretty cool. So I got my degree in agronomy because of Scott, bachelor. I didn't go on the level he did. But anyway, it was there, then I took a job with Dow Chemical. I stopped and saw Scott and Fran on my way to Michigan, where I met my husband. So indirectly, Scott brought us together.
And just a little bit follow up with Ron. So I worked with Scotty when I first started. This was after Scotty had moved to Janesville to start the research station there. In 1992, I started there. And Scotty was quite the mentor to me. So I'm also a corn breeder. There's not that many people that aspire to be a corn breeder. But I benefited a lot from Scotty's experience that allowed me to be very successful in after coming to the research program there. So I have that to thank him. But I also just wanted to share with you a short story. There's a retired gentleman by the name of Mike Ryder that lived in the Janesville area, and we came out here. This is after Scotty had retired. We came out here to go fishing with him, and so we get on, and I brought my two oldest kids with me. This was happened to be, I don't know the year, but it was a year where the river was just really high. And so we get on the boat with Scotty with thinking that we're gonna do some fishing, but we had the greatest boat tour because what was unique, the river was so high that the woods were all underwater. So I felt like we were going through the Amazon because we were going cross country with his boat through the woods. And it was great. It was a really unique experience. And so that's a fond memory, and among many others, but I just want to thank you for allowing Scott to be an important part of my life.